And welcome back to Daily Wrap. I'm Joe Concha, joined by my co-host, Rick Unger. And filling out the panel tonight, Bill Tucker and Brad Hirschfield. One person not happy with the Iran deal is Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
Our concern, of course, is that the militant Islamic State of Iran is going to receive a sure path to nuclear weapons. Many of the restrictions that were supposed to prevent it from getting there will be lifted. And in addition, Iran will get a jackpot, a cash bonanza of hundreds of billions of dollars, which will enable it to continue to pursue its aggression and terror in the region and in the world. This is a bad mistake of historic proportions.
Obviously, Bibi is concerned with Israel's national security, but Secretary of State John Kerry thinks Israel is actually better off.
Israel is safer.
Historic mistake, he said.
Well, he said the same thing about the interim agreement, and he was wrong. The fact is that he's practically been making comments that are way over the top. He doesn't even know what the concessions are that we have not engaged in, because we haven't made concessions. So there's a game here, there's a process here. This is under attack by people who really don't know the terms of the agreement.
Well, that wasn't defensive or anything. Joining us now from Jerusalem, Avishai Ben Sasson Gordis. He's a policy analyst for Malad. That's the Center for the Renewal of Israeli Democracy. Avishai, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you guys for having me.
Netanyahu says it's a bad deal. Do you agree?
Well, I don't agree, regrettably. I think that this deal is the best of the alternatives facing Israel right now to prevent nuclear Iran, which is basically, the top priority for all of us. So if this is the best option on the table, then no, this is not a bad deal.
Avishai, Rick Unger. I'm curious your reaction to the Prime Minister's comments that we'll be giving them a jackpot, literally hundreds of billions of money that we've had frozen that they'll get their hands on. Are you less convinced than the Prime Minister is that they will use that for purposes we'd all rather they didn't?
They will use some of it for purposes that probably we'd prefer them not to use it. But let's focus on the main issue. Why did we freeze this money? Why did you freeze this money to begin with? The issue wasn't the fact that Iran was sponsoring terror. They were doing that since 1979. No one, even in this agreement, thinks that they've changed. That's why actions having to do with their support of terror will stay in place. The main issue is, and the reason we've frozen all this money and we've gone to all this effort to put the sanctions in place, was to stop their nuclear threat, which was, let's face it, the main threat Iran was posing to world and to Israeli security specifically. If we're talking about non-conventional threats to Israel, the Iranian nuclear program is the only current non-conventional threat to Israel. And having this agreement in place takes it off the table. Now, it's true that some of this money, and let's be clear about this, this is only some of this money, because a lot of this money has to go back home to sponsor all those people in Tehran and other places in Iran who are looking forward to this agreement to break off the sanctions and give them some economic relief. That's what brought them to the table. So what we've got here is an agreement that takes care of the biggest threat Israel was seeing around it, and to a certain degree, not too great a degree, adds marginally to other conventional threats, which we are, and I'm saying this as an officer in my background myself, as a military officer, we are perfectly capable of dealing with. So yes, we've got a good deal on our hands that takes care of the biggest problem, and it has less than desirable outcomes in some aspects of it, but the main issue is that it takes care of what should be taken care of, and that's
Avishai, it's Brad Hirschfield. I want to make sure we get you in on a number of different questions here. So I want to ask, because repeatedly in your own position paper you indicate that this is the best available option, that we have no other choice. And my concern, and I ask you this, given that I know you come at this from a position as proud and pro-Israel as those who deeply disagree with you, but when is it ever wise to make a decision based on the sense of having no other options? It seems to me, in fact, that the history of Israel in 60-plus years is to have never played into that canard when it was offered, and to insist that when reality was not what it needed to be, It changed reality to make it peaceful and more humane, the exact opposite of what buying into this deal does.
Now, I'm not sure I actually, I'm not sure I actually see specific examples in which I see. Let's take it from a different angle, maybe. It's the end of a long day here in Israel.
I know it's after midnight. We're glad you're with us.
Yeah. So let's try and come at it from a different direction. I think this is actually coming at a problem that had no better solution from a different angle. Looking back to 2009, Iran had their first stockpile for the first bomb. Okay? And we were looking at different options. Now, one option which is not on the table, let's be clear about this, I would be glad if it was, but it's not a realistic option, is making it so that Iran never had a nuclear program. That's not an option. Now, if that would have been an option, it would have been the best option. The real options on the table are either going to war with Iran and getting some sort of rollback to 2 to 4 years, depends on whether it's an Israeli strike or an American strike, and then you have to go at it again. Israel can't do it, you can do it. So actually bringing Iran to the table and bringing them to a point where they're making concessions about their program, which they were willing to make in the past, I see it as an achievement, and most people I talk to from the security establishment see it the same way.
Hey, we appreciate you joining us again, sir. We're totally out of time, and again, after midnight there. So once again, thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you again soon. Okay, this is the Daily Wrap. More after the break.